Hey, cinema aficionados, Dan Patton, Screen Magazine. Thanks for joining me. Today, we're going to talk to some of the people behind the short film Room Tone, which will screen at the Chicago Horror Festival on Sunday, October 22nd. In the movie making business, room tone refers to the actual individual, barely perceptible sound that every room makes. It's important for filmmakers to capture a sample of this sound so they can use it in post-production when adding sound effects or replacing dialogue so that there is a consistent audio backdrop behind everything that happens. The challenge is in getting this sample because it requires everyone on a film set to sit still while somebody holds a microphone and records what appears to be nothing. This challenge rises to a level of murderous and hilarious frustration in the short film Room Tone.
Room tone. We should get room tone.
Yeah, might as well.
Okay. Rolling on room tone.
Sorry I'm late. That coffee shop was such a shit show. What?
We're trying to get room tone.
What's room tone?
Oh my God.
Wow, good stuff. Today we're here with the director, co-writer, and I believe editor, Mr. Michael Gabriel, and the sound designer, mixer, Mark Ruff, who worked on the film Room Tone and are now going to tell us what it's all about. Now, Michael, can you tell me what was the seed, the initial inspiration for this film, and how did it grow into the feature or the full script?
So the seed of the idea, right? When you're on set, it's a very intense spot. And if you've ever been there during Room Tone, which you did a great job describing, everyone has to stay quiet. And it's almost one of the most awkward and seems to be one of the most hardest things when you're on set to do, just because I think everybody's moving around, everybody's talking. So really the seed of the idea came from a friend of mine who happens to be a sound guy, and he's also really intense, right? And I remember once we were outside of Chicago, like in the city, filming something. There was this guy that was like sawing pipe in a building across the way, right? It was so loud. The sound guy basically, I was like, there's no way we're going to get good sound on this. The sound guy's like, just wait. And so he points to the guy, he's like, hey, and he just goes like this. And the guy stops. And I'm like, whoa, to have that presence, I'm like, now, what if we just take this a step further where everybody's mind might go? And that was the seed of the idea. And we sort of built it there in kind of a fun, creative way.
Now, Mark, you are actually what some people might refer to as a sound guy, or at least you're someone who is familiar with working with the concept of room tone. How did you feel about the script when you first read it? Or more specifically, how often do you suppress the urge to act violently while on a film set and not getting the cooperation you deserve?
Well, luckily, most of my work is post, so I hope that the sound guy on the set was able to get room tone because I worked on a lot of films, and if you don't have it, you're looking for places where someone didn't breathe for 3 seconds and then making and looping it. So when you got a good audio guy on set and he gets a good chunk of room tone, and then it's room tone, and you got to kind of get it from if you move the positions of where you're shooting, like every time it changes, you change camera angles, the sound is gonna change. So you need that constant room tone, and then if you get a couple options of it, you can make a nice bed. I know what they think of sound guys usually. The sound's like no one gives a shit. So the sound guy, no one's being like, whatever, dude. And actually there's one scene where the guy's like, yeah, whatever. When the sound guy wants to get room tone, but the sound guy is like always like sound is always second to everything or third. It's like,
yeah, make sure your sound guy has a nice bed to lie in as far as room tone is concerned. As far as the visuals are concerned, now, Michael, there are cuts and people moving and multiple people speaking. You're going from room to room. You're filming a film set. I mean, there's a lot going on. Let's just talk about the opening scene, which is like 90 seconds long. I believe it's a single take, and you have half a dozen people speaking. How long did it take to choreograph and block that? How many takes before you got that one?
I sort of rehearsed that with the actors maybe 5 times, more or less. The timing was really important, and there was a lot of moving parts to it. I think we ended up doing 15 takes of it, and I think we ended up using number 13. But there were a few good ones in there. But yeah, I think, the being on set, it's always a fun sort of frenetic thing. It feels like everybody's moving, but it's all like this intricate dance. And I wanted to sort of show that in sort of the beginning in a very fun way that only gets stopped by the sound guy. And then we sort of get into the story from there.
How many different rooms are we entering throughout the what, 9-minute short? How many different rooms do we go into?
Oh yeah, so there's few setups. So there's obviously the big interview setup. There's sort of like another area. Gosh, I don't even know what to call it, but like this this area with glass doors where we did this cool like backlit thing, and then also just downstairs underneath. There's this like old gym area with these big punching bags, and then finally this like sort of abandoned kitchen scene, like an industrial kitchen scene area. So yeah, there was a few setups. We were moving pretty quickly.
And throughout this action, Mark, we've got a lot of sound effects. How did you determine where to place the sound effects and which ones were most appropriate? And again, the cameras, I mean, you got kind of extreme close-ups, you got wide shots, you got everything. How did
you just got to match the action. There was, I did try and keep it, use a lot of sounds that were sounds of sound equipment. Since I'm a sound designer working on a movie about a sound guy, and like there's a scene where he actually pulls his gun back. It's actually a microphone. It's a shotgun microphone, and he makes this click sound. Well, all those sounds, it sounds like he cocks it. Now those are sounds from audio equipment, like a Nagra recorder, which is what an old sound guy used to use on set. Now it's all digital, but it used to be a reel-to-reel Nagra recorder was the professional. They were about 50 pounds of equipment that was portable. He'd wear a strap on his shoulder. So I used buttons from that for the cocking sound, and I tried to use lots of other. I used SMPTE time code, which probably no one even knows what that is anymore, but that used to be how you locked machines up. There's this digital time code that would go on all the different machines that would lock up. They would chase and follow this, and that sounded that.
Oh my God! Is this part of room tone?
I think the reason I love collaborating with Mark specifically was because there's the expected things and the expected sound effects and design that you can put, when Mark was saying, yeah, we're just, it's sort of matching the action of what happens. But then there's that creative depth and those creative layers, so when Mark was talking about putting in like all that stuff from the old sound machines and sound equipment, maybe some people won't get it, but it adds this cool artistic depth to the people that do. And not only that, I think there's almost like a subconscious thing that sort of happens when you see that. So you're doing more than just telling the story. You're sort of like using the sound to tell its own story. And I think that's so important. I think, the sound gets the shaft so much, like whether it's on set or like during the mix, it'll be like, oh yeah, whatever, sound, it'd be fine. But it's such an important part. And I think getting that right and being able to really take it to another creative level is super important. So that's why I loved working with Mark on this one, because he surprised me. And that to me is what a good collaboration should be like between a director and, the person who's doing the mix sound design.
What did you do to make sure an audience that is not necessarily an audience of filmmakers will kind of understand what's going on?
I wanted to latch on to things that I think everybody can relate to. And I think everyone can relate to having an intense coworker in one way or another, right? And then everyone can relate to stress and what it does and how people sometimes snap with stress. So those were the sort of like the key things that I wanted to sort of latch on to. So yes, it happens on set. Yes, it has a lot of like little filmmaker insider issue, it's filmmaker insider things that actually happen. But when you actually take a look at it from a bigger standpoint, it's just some guy that's like really intense about his job and stuff does not go his way and he loses his stuff. Let's just say his stuff, right? He loses his patience, right? And I think a lot of people can relate to that.
Tell me about how great the cast was. Where'd you find them?
Danny Rhodes, who's the co-writer, he actually acts as the producer in there. He was helping out with casting. He had his whole network of people. And one of his good friends, Mickey O'Sullivan, who plays the sound guy, I actually met him on set, a couple years ago, or was it last year? Last year when I was filming the the opening for the Chicago Blackhawks is called the Hit the Ice video, Mickey was on set helping out. He actually, you know, put the hockey gear on, and he plays hockey, and so do I. And so we started talking hockey, and then I heard he was in a horror film, and this is right when I was casting Room Tone, and I was like, well, come audition for it. And so he did, and he did an amazing job. So that's how I found Mickey, which is a huge win for Room Tone. But yeah, I think the actors did really, really well in terms of the hand-to-hand combat. I sort of like choreographed it with myself, you know, in that room for like an hour, just figuring out what I think should happen. And then I got Mickey and LaShonda in there, and like, I'm sure Mickey's probably had a little bit of hand-to-hand combat stuff, but I don't know if LaShonda ever did, but she did amazing. Like, they just like knocked it out of the park. The best that you could sort of, you know, expect with not having any sort of like stunt people or choreographers or whatnot. We were just doing it because we thought like, oh, this could be kind of cool and fun, and here's some fun ideas to it. You know, I was inspired a lot by old Jackie Chan movies, ones that he directed, and some fun action stuff that he did. And so that was partially inspiration when coming up with some of those hand-to-hand scenes. Other than that, Paul Incaprio, who's the DP, did such an amazing job with it. He moved fast. Like you said, we had all those setups. We had to move really, really quickly. And then Amy Stewart, our producer, who like pulled everything together in order to sort of make this work, was phenomenal. And then finally, let's talk about the music, right? Because that's such a huge part. So I collaborated, you know, with Greg Allen, Tony Elfers, and Sonic Sphere in Chicago, and they did such an amazing job. Like, we sort of talked about it, and I sent them some references, and just having that score really match the picture in such a fun way to help elevate the scenes. It just adds that extra bit of creative juice to make this even better. You know, I think as a director, it's my job to try and surround myself with professionals that are so good from a creative standpoint, because it is a teamwork. I mean, it's a team building exercise in a sense of film. You know, you really need real talent from so many people in order to sort of elevate it.
So yeah, Greg Allen from Sonic Sphere, he called me before Michael did, so he kind of got me involved with this project. But I've been doing sound design stuff, collaboration with him for years. Greg has always been very complimentary of me. I can you know, I don't bury his music with commercials under an announcer. That's the old joke. When I die, I'm going to be buried under an announcer. Anyway, so and in this, I sent it to him, and they gave me some a lot of input on mix in certain scenes where sometimes as a mixer you favor the last thing you did. You know, you work really hard on some sound design, and that's like when you're mixing. I was favoring it, and then they gave me input and took that down and brought certain parts of the music up. So they're great to collaborate with, and yeah, I can't speak highly enough of Greg and Tony. They're A-level guys.
Sort of just adding on just real quick from that, I really like to work with people like Mark, like Greg, that will challenge me. They throw curveballs in there in terms of the creative and be like, have you thought about doing things this way? Or what about that? And sometimes it's not like, sometimes I'm like, no, I don't think so. But sometimes it makes it so much better. And it's just like those strong creative opinions are so important when it comes to like really making this piece, because if everybody just does what I like, you know, what I originally have in mind, we could be missing out on so many other great ideas. So I like working with like really creative people that can challenge me as a director and challenge us to make a better piece.
Rolling I forgot to plug it back in.